Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Event Pro Show. I am your host, Seth Mackey. I'm the CEO of LEMG. We're an event production company based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we travel all over the country producing primarily corporate events for meeting planners. Those tend to be our end clients. And today's guests, I'm very excited about because this is a world that I don't get to play in very often in the exhibit world, and my guests have some specific knowledge that I don't have. So these are the best episodes for me because I get to ask questions as if I don't know because I don't know. So that's a good thing. But guys, let me, and congratulations, both of you. This is our first double guest episode. So you're breaking barriers on this show. So congratulations. But my first guest is Jackie Beaulieu. Jackie is a leader in the exhibit and events industry with deep expertise in the healthcare sector. She's an instructor for the Healthcare Meeting Compliance Certificate, or HMCC program, and previously served as executive director of the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association. Jackie is a founding board member of the Event Education Workforce Development Federation, and serves on the executive committee for MPI's Medical Meeting Planner Advisory Council, MPI Exhibitor Community, and as president-elect of MPI Georgia. Shout out to my fellow Office of the President MPI peeps around the country. And we also have Rick Cunahan, who serves as the vice president and general manager at Peretta and Orr, working across all industry sectors, but specializing in the healthcare sector, particularly within the emerging and biotech spaces. Since joining the industry in 2005, Rick has leveraged his extensive experience in leadership to guide products and companies from pre-launch through launch phases. His role encompasses overseeing company operations and client services, allowing him to develop strategic plans tailored to client needs and objectives. Jackie and Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Now, I mentioned both of you have a bunch of expertise in things that I do not. So I'm excited to get to those questions in a second. But before we do, just to set it up, how did both of you get your start in the events world? Jackie, let's start with you.
Yeah, mine is kind of it seems like everybody kind of fell into it.
Totally.
Right? So mine was self-preservation. I worked in corporate America at GTE, and I had just bought my first little house, and then a notice, which made me nervous anyway, right? Your first home purchase. And then an announcement that there were going to be layoffs. And I started to kind of freak out because I just bought a home. And so then I made it through that. My boss said, the good news is you're safe. The bad news is there's another round in 3 months. And I thought, this is not for me. I am totally out of control to the degree in which we can't control things. So I started looking for a job, and I saw a really unique position at a employee-owned company called the Kellen Company, and they managed the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association. And I started as probably a glorified secretary and moved my way up, and the rest is history. And I learned a lot about healthcare and HCPs and healthcare associations and association management and exhibits and marketing, and
events just sucked you in. It just sucked you in like the rest of us.
It did.
Well, how about you, Rick?
I started really out of school. It was no different than a kid out of school trying to get interviews in a job, and had connections from the local town I was in. I had never heard of the company, barely heard about the industry. I went to school for business and advertising, and they spend about 2.5 pages on the live events world in those classes. So I started with P&O in 2005 as an account coordinator in our account services group, and have gone through account services group and then overseeing operations and then into the GM role 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, I think right before COVID, lucky enough to land into the GM role right before the pandemic. So I've been fortunate to be here 20 years under two great owners that as my kind of career has evolved and the company is certainly looks a lot different than it did 20 years ago in all the best ways. So, and then to Jackie's point and your point, Seth, it kind of just sucks you in. You know, I tell people that often when we interview new people or certainly kids out of school, you'll know real quick if this industry is for you. And if it is, then it kind of just pulls you in a great way.
That's totally correct. I mean, some people just do not connect with it at all, but some people, it just, once you start, it is a bit addictive. And it's kind of like any show. It's similar to like being in a theater or a play or something, or if you ever perform music or something, there's like this, you do this thing together and it's scary and fun and exciting, and then it's over and everybody has this camaraderie. It's the same when you're executing corporate events or exhibits or whatever. You all work towards a goal. You're pretty sure you can do it, but there's an element of like, oh, you know, it's hard. And then you do it and everybody's like, oh, it's addictive. It's like, you want to do it again, you know?
Yeah.
You mentioned, can I say P&O? Because
Sure.
you guys, that's the cool way of talking about you guys. So I'm going to do that. So can you give just a quick little synopsis of what P&O specializes in, what you deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pareto Nora, P&O, founded by two owners 40 years ago this year, actually 1986. So celebrating 40 years this year.
Nice.
And at the time, and I only go back this far because it's still so relevant, which I also think is rare. At the time, Joe Pareto came from a traditional exhibit background, and Barbara Orr came from more of a scientific agency background. And the combination became something that has got a little latched onto in a really good way, but it's also why we're focused on healthcare. Let's bring some strategy and healthcare strategy specifically to the world of conventions. So you can cross all the T's and dot all the I's and get the booths out there and set them up, and that's all great. If you can't do that well, you don't stay around as an exhibit house that long. I think the key for us has been to bring kind of more of a strategy solution to our clients. So we focus a lot on healthcare. About 70% of our business is in healthcare. The other part of our business is really diverse, which is great. We have some great industrial clients. We have some food and beverage clients. We have sporting. We have retail. And all of those kind of other industries let us pull in a little more knowledge into kind of the baseline of our healthcare business. So we do everything from exhibit design, fabrication, full program management, various size programs, Fortune 500 companies down to startup companies. And our teams are all over the place supporting those programs, both domestically and globally. And then the other part of our business is event planning and event production as well. So the corporate events and then the hybrid in between that is private user conferences and events like that. So our goal is to kind of get out of the order taking mentality that sometimes can get into the exhibit world and get into a planning and a partnership and a strategy level. And then, of course, also be able to execute well on the blocking and tackling that goes along with our industry.
You mentioned that order taking versus you're kind of implying like long-term relationships. Has this been kind of a key to success with you and your clients through the years? Do you have some recurring clients that now it's more of a relationship and way less of order taking? You kind of get in on the ideation side of it with them?
Yeah, I mean, and part of that, you're spot on. Part of that is also because naturally, I think healthcare, emerging biotech specifically, works a bit that way. Everybody's kind of worked for everybody. A lot of people bounce around. There's a lot of long-term relationships that get pulled from one to the next. But we have clients that have been clients or are tied to original clients that were original clients of the business. And a lot of that is being so dedicated to the market. As some of our other industries start to expand, we're seeing similar things. So in the industrial market, we have some key clients. Well, those people are starting to work for other people and bring us into other spots. So it's the same formula. It happened to work very well with the healthcare world just because of how that world works in its own. But it certainly has been, if we can make ourselves valuable beyond just, knowing how to ship a booth across the country,
Right.
that's been one of the keys.
So, Jackie, on that note, P&O serves many industries, but this question kind of centers around the healthcare community. You serve a lot of pharma, medical device, biotech, dermatology, all of that kind of the healthcare world. Can you explain what the HMCC program is and why it's important for event professionals serving in the healthcare space?
Yeah, sure I can. So, what's great about the HMCC is that it's an MPI program. It's a certificate, and it stands for the Healthcare Meeting Compliance Certificate Program. And it's about a 4-hour class, and it really helps event professionals, exhibit professionals understand the unique needs of our regulated and very compliant industry, and it gives them a really nice background about why we need to be super sensitive to how we interact with HCPs, what we can and cannot say in a booth or at a meeting, what we can talk about, how we do transfers of values or TOVs when we make travel arrangements or bring them in for an event and they're getting a speaker fee or a research fee. There's all regulations behind this, and I won't go too deep because it's called a class. But there's a lot to it, and you really want to mitigate risk. And so I think the HMCC, above anything else, anyone that takes that class, and I think there's over 4,000 people that have that designation now, have a very heightened sensitivity to when they're listening to, I think I should question this. I'm not sure I should be doing it this way. Let me ask about this. Let me go back to your legal department. And then also, the other thing I would also say, and then I'll stop, would be that compliance is a really unique thing in healthcare because there's federal law, state law, there's guidelines, there's rules that associations have, and and then there's company policy, right? And so you as a compliance person or a regulator in this industry have to find the way that all fits best for your company, and really what understanding how that layers in the hierarchy of all the regulations is super important.
So Seth, from our perspective, from a P&O perspective, if you listen to Jackie outline that whole angle on the HMCC and the compliance and the value to when we've known Jackie forever since she was with HCA, and we were heavily involved in it. One of our owners was involved in it. To bring somebody like that on board from our end as our senior director of marketing, and then if you look at her title, it's marketing, it's advocacy, and it's strategy. It's a great value for all the knowledge that Jackie just outlined to then apply to how we're actually executing events and making sure we have that lens on it for the clients as well, because it's a unique lens, as Jackie's outlining, to have that very specific HMCC, not only education, but be the person that does the teaching of it. But it has been one of those things that starts to really dial in that niche of healthcare. And then you look at her general marketing eye and things like that beyond that. But the healthcare niche, as we talk about that with the company, that's a real key part of Jackie's role in the strategy on how we recommend things out to clients. So
Jackie, you're quite the competitive advantage there, is what, if I could boil down what I'm hearing. And I know, Jackie, you're saying like this is a class, so I can't answer everything here, but how, if you could summarize a little bit or unpack a little bit more of how do healthcare events differ from normal corporate events? Because I do think that I think you breezed by a few things there, but I think it's harder than it looks. And what if you could kind of summarize, like these are kind of, in a normal event, you can do this, but in healthcare, what would those like key differences be there?
Well, I think sometimes, I think sometimes people think the healthcare events or meetings have to be boring because they are very regulated and there is a lot of
Yeah.
compliance. And I can assure you that is not true. You just have to work with the right partners that know how to push that boundary, find that area that your company is comfortable with to do and offer creative solutions at your event or in your exhibit booth. So but they are different because there is so much compliance, and there's also, balancing the science of it all, the education of it all, the research of it all, the patient impact. So there's a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're designing either an event that is healthcare focused or even an exhibit booth. The way an exhibit booth is structured, tied to what your definition is for success for that particular show, will really determine how it is designed. And that could include, healthcare insurance kiosks. I mean, so lots of different things you have to think about for sure.
So, we're in a business of communicating. We're all kind of communicators. We're communicating ideas. And what I'm hearing is that in healthcare, communication really matters, and accurate communication, and the way you communicate it, what you're promising, what you're saying, what you can say, what you can't say. So all I'm saying is I probably need to register for your class. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And is it,
Sorry.
I think there's suppliers that might be listening too, or even planners. But is that a great place to start getting that certification, the HMCC? Is it a certification that you get when you take that class?
Well, it's a certificate. A certification would be the CMP-HC, which is a much more deeper dive, many months of study. So that is much more in depth. But
is that a prerequisite, or can you take your class separately as like a standalone?
A separate standalone. So if you were new to this, and what I would say is, we always hear some of the younger generation, they want purpose. They want a job that really provides them meaning. And I would say, man, healthcare is it. Like, you will find it, because I don't care how trite or overused this sentence is in our industry. We help create better patient care. Even the exhibit houses are contributing to that mission. And so if you want a purpose and you're young, get involved in the healthcare events and exhibits industry or hospitality. It really can provide you meaning. It's challenging. It's not going anywhere. We'll all need healthcare for many, many years to come, I would assume. And so, I think it's a great avenue for young people too.
So you're the incoming president of the MPI Georgia chapter, correct?
Yeah.
So if you had a young student member of MPI come up to you and say, "This is what I want to go into planning. I want to get into this space," what's the pathway you would recommend, if like in an elevator speech to them?
Yep, I would say, be sure you take the HMCC, find yourself a good mentor, ask a lot of questions, stay curious. I can tell you, when you work in healthcare, it is not you learn something and it's static. It could be very different the very next day you wake up. You learn about legal and compliance and it's no longer applicable in the morning. I mean, it literally can change like that. So just know that it's an industry that will keep you on your toes, but it will challenge you. It's rewarding, and you have to be willing to continue the educational journey. Always be interested and curious, and this industry will suit you fine.
Love it. Now, I spent some time looking at your marketing material with P&O and what you put out to the world, what you work on, who you work with. Beautiful booths and exhibit spaces and events that you create. But Rick, when you have a brand new client that comes in, into your, however you're intaking. Can you walk me through the planning and then into the execution process of what you're thinking about, what you're trying to actually learn about them? How does it work with you? And
Sure.
how do you develop what you're trying to accomplish with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we try to control at least our best practices best we can. It doesn't mean every client system or their organic systems on their end are gonna flow the way we want them to flow, but we try to drive as much as we can from our side when it comes. And this could be healthcare or not. Actually, this isn't industry specific at all. From our perspective, onboarding, whether it's a new client who's already been out in the convention space or somebody getting into the convention space. We have to, and it's a little. I think it's become a little too cliche in the industry, but it shouldn't be. We truly have to understand why they're going to conventions, and that's going to differ from healthcare to industrial to sporting good to outdoors. We cover all those different markets, so they're all going to have different reasons. But until we discover why and who they're trying to say what to, it's very hard to put a program recommendation together that will then measure that objective. And that's really, if you just jump right into designing the fancy booth or, okay, how many shows do you have and how can I route the properties and how can I use technology, you're kind of missing you won't know until after you complete all those shows that you don't have the metrics to measure it and to deliver a report back to your clients on it. So now some clients are very basic. Some we're out there to get leads and we want the numbers to go up, and then I'm going to give those leads to my field reps and they're going to go close orders. And this becomes one of the bigger differences in healthcare versus other industries. Typically, healthcare doesn't have the thing on site that they're selling. It's not an industrial show, where I can say, here's the widget that I'm going to sell, and then the rep will follow up and sell you 1,000 of them. So the communication strategy around that becomes different, and that's all part of the onboarding part of it. Admittedly, that's also why we've grown in healthcare so much, is because if you can get good at that, I do think it's a bit of a specific skill set to do that well and understand how you're going to measure the objectives. And the key there being throughout planning and execution, even healthcare company A and healthcare company B, if I want to be specific to the industries, they're going to have different objectives for what makes a successful show based on their leadership and their target audiences and all those things. So it is never, throughout our entire process, it is never a one size fits all answer. It can't be. And if it was, then you're just assuming all their objectives are the same for their entire program. So that's all on. That's a very long answer to the onboarding part of it. But if we don't understand how they want to set their program up or why it's successful or what makes it, that you're kind of chasing your tail the whole way through. And then beyond that, you get into really heavy logistics once you kind of understand the strategy. And we will bring like Jackie in, for example. It's a great example to kind of say, okay, who are you talking to? Where can we talk to them? Are we overlooking any engagement opportunities, whether it be shows or private events? So we'll push a strategy document back into their laps and say, and most of the time these guys that work in healthcare, for example, or industrial, they know where they want to be. They know where their targets are. But sometimes we'll find those little nuggets of secondary or tertiary targets. And then it's about execution on top of it. And that can look, 1,000 different ways, Seth. It can be a custom rental program that's got a big portable program on the back end of it. It can be a massive custom exhibit that moves around the country 25 times a year and has ancillary events tied to it at every show. And it really, at that point, you're really talking about what product are they trying to sell? What's their target audience look like? And that triggers everything else on our end. So that triggers different departments being involved. It triggers different creative generation. It can trigger interactive or not. It can, so it all, the execution part of it is less of a standard roadmap because it all differs based on the needs. The onboarding part is the part we try to spend a lot of time on because it just sets the programs up for good success later.
So you're asking, what if everything is done right, what's the best outcome with working with us? And you try to determine that and then reverse engineer from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and that's and if we do transition some clients who are transitioning into, off of other suppliers into new ones, sometimes they get it, and anybody can be guilty of this. You get into a little bit of like, you're just going through the cycle of shows and you're not really thinking about, are we pulling the best impact from these shows? So sometimes you even have to with very long-term clients, we have to kind of stop ourselves and say, okay, before we start planning next year, let's rediscover this program and maybe it didn't change at all, but we have to take the time to rediscover it to make sure we're still bringing the right product and the right solutions to the table.
Right. Always keeping a fresh eye on what you're trying to do next year.
Which is not easy. You can get into the modes of just churning out good product and hitting the shows. So you have to consciously put effort into the kind of the pause button once in a while.
I think that's a balancing act that people don't talk about enough is long-term clients. There's a wonderful comfort to that for both sides because it's way less risk. It's a lot of risk mitigation. You know what you're going to get, but you have to balance it with let's remain relevant to what's happening in the marketplace right now. Like we can't just assume that last year's thing worked. We have to look at it fresh. And I think that's something that's you have to really motivate yourself to remain in that space, with long-term clients. And Jackie.
An example of that, Seth, would be, and Rick knows this because he's pulled me into a couple conversations, is as healthcare changes, the needs of our clients change and maybe their pipelines change. And so they have different expanded. And so they've always focused on HCPs physicians, right? But as our industry changed, we all see nurses and PAs an awful lot now, and they wield a lot of influence over decisions or healthcare treatments. Maybe not final decisions, but so we would.
So that's a new development.
Yeah. So we would do research on, have you considered some of these nursing shows or PA shows or events? And so that's like one of the things I think we do really well is keeping our finger on the pulse of the industry to see how changes in it could affect our current clients.
Oh, that is so interesting. And then, understanding like maybe that's a function of doctors having so much more admin work to do now, and they're leaning more on their support staff. And, I don't know, I'm just making up what it could be, but understanding what that is.
And a lot of times, Seth, our clients know who they need to talk to. Obviously, they're marketing, they're healthcare marketing professionals. They know exactly who they want to talk to. They're not sure where those people are, and that's our job. It's not for us to dictate targets, and they know that better than anybody. It's their brands, but where you can get access to those people, and then what shows are healthy as far as being well attended, where the HCPs are actually going themselves versus, to your point, sending staff. And not that you want to ignore one or the other, you just need to know which is which. So it's we see about 850-ish healthcare shows a year across the company. So it gives us good kind of eyes on the different dynamics that are happening with the associations and how they're interacting with both their attendees, the HCPs, and then also their exhibiting community.
Oh, you have such a unique perspective with that volume. There's no way any one company could go to everything in a way that you do, and you see insights from so many different groups. So you have a unique position in that space for sure. You guys are mentioning change, and you have seen this space, exhibit style events, for a while now. How have they fundamentally changed over the last couple decades, years? You're mentioning in that one industry, the actual gatekeepers that your clients are trying to get a hold of have changed. But have the events themselves changed in how we communicate ideas and share and generate leads and all the things you're trying to do?
Yeah, I can give my take. Jackie's got a nice different perspective on that, coming from the association side of a lot of her career. My take, really just working with a variety of clients through my whole career, and then seeing all different associations and shows. The fundamentals of conventions, I don't think, have drastically changed. There's a lot of specific things within them that have drastically changed, but you still have a group of target people actively coming to you to learn about your product, right? So the fundamental part, and that's any industry. So great, you are sending out your team, and then you have inbound customers versus needing to push outbound salespeople hoping you get into your customers. They're coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that perspective, that's why conventions will be around. It's because that whole theory is very attractive. And then you layer on things with the healthcare on the continuing education part of it. And then you get into a little bit of they're checking other boxes and continuing education, which we all need, but they're doing that while they're also engaging with the exhibiting clients. There are things in the exhibit world that I think have drastically changed, and I can only speak to the last 20 years. And then there's things we look at the show for, and we're like, yeah, they're still doing some exhibiting like they did 20 years ago. It maybe just has a different material on it, but the shape's the same. And the same guys set the booth that used to set it 20 years ago, and it's the same union stuff, and it's the same, house stuff. So a lot of the blocking and tackling, I always call it, hasn't changed. I'd say over the past, since the mid, say 2015 into now, the biggest thing changing is a lot of strategy. And again, I'm being specific to healthcare in this comment, but a lot of strategy for why we're going, how we're going, and then probably most importantly, how we're measuring it. And a lot of that has to do because of the tools that exist for us to measure different things. But back in early 2000s, the measurement was I spent XYZ dollars and I got ABC leads, and I'm going to do the division, and that's my cost per lead. That's a terrible way to.
What's my close ratio?
It doesn't show a very good ratio for the convention world. But now you can just get so much more in depth because of the technology. So you can see what they were interested in, where they moved around, what the really specific follow-up from the field might be. So it allows us to get more value out of the shows. And show numbers used to be the top conversation with clients, how many attendees go. It still comes up, but it's not a top conversation. It's about the quality of attendee that's going. Now, you don't want to see numbers dwindle, so I'm not saying it's not looked at, but my point being, I think the focus of where we pull value out of conventions has changed drastically. How we execute, we're just using some different stuff and some really much cooler ways to do it, and we can put out some really fancy things that 20 years ago wouldn't have even been an option. So that part of it is just naturally changing as the rest of the industry and the world changes to make the output a little different. But it's to Jackie's earlier point, that's part of the reason why it gets hard to nail down. It's an ever-changing dynamic of the target audiences, and how you engage with them is really just always on a change lever. And as soon as you think you have it nailed, something else happens, and now it's, the reps can't get in the same way in the offices. So now we have to do conventions differently, and KOL meetings and dine-arounds. And, so the levers just start to get pulled so differently.
Because their needs have changed.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The needs, or to Jackie's point, what you're allowed to do has changed. So you need to, adapt and go the other way.
There's multiple layers of what you're talking about right now. So I'm trying to decide which direction to go. But, on that note, the thing I think about is as data gets more granular in our ability to track, it challenges assumptions that were made in the past. So to your point of, it was like top line attendee numbers was like everything. And now it's more like, what action are we getting at the bottom of that? And the way I think about it is, I think companies do this. They say how many millions in revenue they do. It's like a vanity number. And what I'm interested these days is how much did you keep at the end of the year? Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter. And so it's the same thing with events. Like the events might even be smaller, but highly, like way more effective, because we're able to track an individual's journey, an attendee's journey, and where did they end up,
Yeah, and a lot of it has become, and again, it's for our clients and their market research teams and their market analyst teams to take the good data and do what they want from a customer behavior perspective. But a lot of it has become, it's not about getting the actual information of the attendee. If we can, it's great, but there's all sorts of things around that now that didn't used to exist in any industry. That's not just a healthcare thing. But if I can show trends of what those attendee groups were interested in at a show, and to your point, the journey of a show, or best case scenario, I can put 3 or 4 different activations together as one long story of how they interacted at an exhibit or a private event, even better. Then a market research team takes that and starts to make top level changes to positioning and strategy. And that trickles down to us then, because then you're making functional changes to schedule and size and frequency and how many shows and those types of things. So it's not like this magic bullet of, hey, this convention then told you how to change how you pitch your product, but it certainly has focus on what the different groups of people you're really interested in are interested in and what their journey is on the show floor.
And Jackie, what do you think about our attendees, like this generation of attendees right now, or the up and coming generation? Are they expecting more from events? Are they expecting it to be a different experience than maybe the previous group thought about?
Yes, I think so. So Rick, chime in, but I think from what we see is that they're much more targeted with their expectations. They walk into a booth, they're very busy. So they want to leave smarter than when they came. A lot of HCPs don't even have time to see the patients that they have at an office. So when they devote 2 or 3 days to go to an event,
that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a real big deal. So make sure that when they go to your exhibit that they are walking out with the information they came. So a lot of these experiences, and now it's not just here's a brochure, it's an experience. You're trying to elicit here's what your patients feel, or here's learning more about the disease state, or here's learning more about the research that we're doing in this field. You walk away smarter and you personalize the experience to the degree in which you can. So a lot of work in an exhibit at a trade show should be done well in advance of ever setting the booth up, so that you're setting your company up for success.
Okay, so you bring something up that I wasn't planning on asking. But when you think of a booth, just your classic expo booth or exhibit booth, what are the hallmarks of a fantastic booth, regardless of like the size or whatever? But like when you think of it, what should it have?
Yeah, I mean, our and I'm sorry, Jackie, I'm going to give some early thoughts on that one. Our hallmark kind of approach to any creative and design is about elements being unique. So, and that doesn't matter if it's a 10 by 10 or a 50 by 50, and that's really the key. So I think if we can there are functional basic things that are best practices, which I think also have evolved on managing costs and budget, and we haven't gotten into that part of the conversation today. But so booth structure and how they're actually designed and fabricated have been driven by other factors, which is great. It's not been a negative thing. But a successful booth has to have a purpose to identify either the product or the company that's there and give it that identity. So what we ask our clients when we're first designing a booth for them, and it could be a rental or a custom, it could be a 10 by 20 or 100 by 100. What do you want the attendee to feel when they walk into the booth from a brand perspective? And sometimes that's my corporate umbrella brand of XYZ and all the products that fall into it. And sometimes that is, we just launched a product, so we want this product's campaign to completely come to life in this environment, in this space. And that's always been kind of like a little buzzword, that we're building out environments, not exhibits. I'd say we used to use that buzzword more, but then we were executing on it. I say that industry wide. I think it's really being executed on now. I think these are, especially at a high level healthcare, or and I'll use industrial too as a space. These are high level environments that the clients want to be perceived as a high level, high science, high product, high quality, without being circusy or over the top. And there's the balance point there. But that booth needs to scream the client's identity. Especially, we work on a lot of emerging clients and emerging biotech. So especially if you're new to the show floor and these HCPs don't know who you are yet. And so to answer your question, Seth, there's no one answer to what the thing is, because every client has a different answer to give me the soft part of your booth. Give me the soft part of the look, feel, tone, and what you want people to remember. That's going to be different based on that client's culture and identity. But if you can translate that into any booth you make, that's the successful part of a booth, because that's what they want. They want their identity to sit with that person after they leave the space or leave the interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
That's
only thing I was gonna say to this would, and because Rick's answer, I couldn't even embellish it any further, except that I would say that it just starts with, what do you define as success? Because there is no magical, beautiful booth that, if it's not tied back to what you define as what your goals and mission are for that show or your business objectives, it doesn't matter how pretty or cool it is. It's not going to be successful. It's going to be
Right.
pretty.
It's going to be pretty. Yeah. Yeah.
the results. The results are what you're after. So it has to grab the attention of the people in that room that you want to pay attention to it. So it's a unique space, because it's like you're in such a competitive, that room is competitive.
Yeah.
And so, and you have these set physical parameters, you said it 10 by 10, 10 by 20, whatever, 50 by 50, whatever it is, there's these boxes. And beyond that, everybody's trying to gain that attention, so how do you do it in a tasteful way that represents the brand? It's a pretty cool world you guys are in. I'm very, very interested in learning more about it. Are there any trends in the exhibit space that are exciting to you right now? Like new stuff, technology, how people are utilizing old tools?
Technology is driving so much. Luckily we have great partners that we kind of force them to, to keep us on the edge of the new things that are coming out. And technology, just as a term, has become so broad, as you would imagine, and from event production. It's there's interactive technology, there's the actual displays, which is a variety of technologies thing, and some things that have been reinvented. People tried to limp through holograms 15 years ago, and now if you see them in the exhibits, they are impressive.
Gotten pretty cool
when they're used for a purpose. I mean, and that's really that's our key. And we have this conversation almost daily with clients. It's like, I'm not going to sell you a technology just because it's the coolest, newest technology, unless we can make it display a message and a story and something for a purpose, no matter what industry you're in. So technology is driving 100% to some of the newest and coolest things out there. There are we do lean on kind of low tech engagements as well. So if we see a campaign or we see an objective where it's like, hey, we can lean into kind of a low tech fun engagement for an attendee because they've had screens in front of their face all day and they've been touching their phone all day and putting VR headsets on. So if I can give them a kind of a low tech community engagement or something in the booth, let's explore that. And I think that those good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not sure, those tend to be kind of the memorable things on the show floor. It's not always the coolest game that I played on education of a product, but it might be about this low tech market research thing that I did because the display was really cool. And I remember the fountain that we built on the floor that I threw a quarter into when I answered my market research question. So there's an interesting balance there right now. As I say, the tech's driving the biggest differences on the show floor, but when you can blend the two in one space, it really becomes a cool space.
I agree. I think that the way that I think of technology now is utilizing everything at your disposal to accomplish a purpose of truly understanding like what your client wants. And when that happens, whether it's low tech or high tech, and it really cuts through, there's like an elegance to it. And that to me shows like high professionalism. Is they might use the latest technology, but they're not doing it just because. They're doing it because it's the best tool. And they understand that first question you were saying, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Okay, well, actually, if you're trying to do that, there's something that's completely low tech, but it will cut through all the noise and be a hit and get the results you want. That's the professional I want to work with, that knows all the tools available and how to use them.
And sometimes that's picking the less revenue generating product. It's you could walk through any high level healthcare show right now and you'll see 10 kinetic LED walls with the moving blocks of LEDs and things like that. And that's great. They're beautiful and they are super cool. And that's as nice as it gets right now, technology wise. But if I can be that really fancy booth that doesn't have that and has a really unique sculpture, iconic, low tech, something going on, because now there's 5 or 6 different major exhibitors using these, whereas 3 years ago there was one using it. It was really cool. So I think part of it is also like trying to, without a crystal ball, trying to figure out when that piece of tech has had its moment where you're just using something they see everywhere versus using something that could maybe be rethought a little bit. And that's certainly not easy, but it is how we look at oh, now we just see that everywhere. We'll come back from a lot of shows and say, yeah, that tech we loved, 2 years ago is now all over the show floor, so it's getting ready to kind of have its moment of sunset at some point.
This is a question that we have all the time of equipment of what there's like two groups. There's staple equipment that's going to be around, and then there's gimmicky equipment. And for CapEx, like what we're going to invest in, it's a safe bet that you can buy the staple products because they're going to be in everything. Like you buy that sound system and you're going to use that for 10 years. It sounds great, whatever. But like you mentioned, kinetic LED wall, I don't know how long that's going to be around. It looks cool, but it's like once you've seen it, it's like neat. Okay. I think a TV would work here.
And if you're going to use that kind of technology, you need to have the budget to put really good content on it. And that's right. Where sometimes
if you know how to use it, you got to know how to use it.
Just like your stuff at live events. If you're going to use the fanciest stuff you can put into a ballroom, you should have some nice content to put up on it.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Well, I know you guys are not, you can't read the future, but what do you think exhibits and events will look like in 10 years? And it's a broad question because there's no right answer. I just want to know your thoughts when you're thinking about the future.
Well, I'll just have a very simple answer for it because you're right, and I can't read the future, right? But with all of this AI that is being utilized and talked about and discussed, I believe that the future of live events and exhibits, and it's not a new thought, we're all talking about this, will become even more important because I don't know about you, I don't know anymore. Is this a real email? Was that a real video I watched? Was that a real telephone call?
I don't even know if you're real right now, Jackie.
She's the AI Jackie.
Right. Maybe. Who knows?
We'll have to do
I agree.
Double authentication. Anyway, so I think because of AI, it's going to make live events and exhibits and just so much more important to have those really meaningful face-to-face truth.
Yep.
I understand what you're talking about and believe it implicitly because I can reach out and touch you. And I think it's really important and really is going to be great for our industry as a result.
I agree with that sentiment for sure.
I think the core of conventions is people want to get out and network with other people that do what they do for a living. So they want to get out and network shoulder to shoulder. A lot of times that drives conventions, and the exhibitors are just kind of the add-on great value part when they're also there networking. There's other people that want to get out there and sell their most recent golf club or golf cart or flashlights at the SHOT Show in Vegas every year, or whatever it is. So those things are always going to want to happen. People that want to buy product are going to want to go touch the product and buy it at consumer shows. People that need education, they can get some online, and we know that, and we've proven that theory, or the industry has. But they want to go network with other HCPs, for example, about best practices. They want to hear from live KOLs during presentations. All these things that happen in and around convention halls. So I don't think the fundamentals of that is going to change. I think they'll be advanced. I think they'll be more efficient. Could shows get shorter and be more efficient? Maybe. Could show hours differ 10 years from now? Maybe. I think there's a couple little things I think there's a couple industry things that the industry itself needs to pay attention to a little bit, just in my biased opinion. And I think there's some big players that drive that. And I think we have to be paying attention to kind of costs for exhibit versus the value people are getting from them. I think, and we tell our clients quite often, you should be very vocal and involved at a association level. They need you as an exhibitor, and associations that treat their exhibitors well are just healthier associations. So I think that needs to keep kind of the hammer down. But I think there's some major players out there that need to kind of pay attention on some of the fluctuations of cost and the impact on budgets of our clients in any industry, and kind of be smart about how much we expect these people to spend on this outlet channel. because the value of it's there, and there's no debate the value of it's there. I think we have to make sure we can control what we can control from an output perspective, just to not get ourselves any bad way from an industry wide cost impact.
Yes.
Technology will get cooler and then it'll go away, and then something new will come out, and we'll use low tech again, and then we'll use the new fancy high tech stuff, and all that's going to be great. I do think, to Jackie's point with the AI part of it, I think while AI and whatever that becomes will drive a lot of need for human interaction, I do think we'll also use the tool for better measurement on the show floor or just around congresses in general. And I think that'll be exciting over the next 10 years on what we can, even now versus 10 years ago. It's so drastically different in all the great ways. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what that does to being able to pull good data out of a show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great example of what we were just talking about, is Jackie's point of generative AI is making it very difficult to know if you're engaging with a real human virtually. However, there's, things like, to your point, Data or Wordly is, one of several companies that do translation services on the spot. And where I see that is, imagine a expo floor where anyone that speaks any language can interact with anybody at any time, or you can bring experts without having to have a requirement that they know the language of the hosting country, or, those types of practical uses of AI tools will make that in-person experience even better, and that is like that, using technology in an appropriate way instead of trying to replace something that was already great, like face-to-face interaction. We're humans, and we've been this way for a very long time. We need to interact in real life. But if it can enhance that, that's really cool. That's a cool use of tech for sure. Well, I really appreciate both of you being on this show. I do have one last question for you, if you have a second. You've done events. You've done one or two events in your lifetime, if not thousands. Out of all the events you've worked on, what's been your favorite one?
Well, I'll just answer this I'll try to be quick anyway, but to me, it's not a favorite event, because now, strategy-wise, I'm not going to a lot of the events. I'm more behind the scenes. So one of the things that I am most proud of while I've been at P&O, and it's been almost 10 years that I've been there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Was during COVID, actually. I really learned a lot about our company and our leadership, and I loved the fact that we were stuck, just like everyone, making sneeze guards and wondering what's next, where are we going, why can't we go to live events, right? And leadership said, we don't want this, let's move it forward, let's help move the industry needle forward. So what we did was research and focus groups with associations. We did research and focus groups with pharma, medical device, biotech companies, and we found out what they were thinking, what they needed, what was the talk in there. And then we did research papers, and we presented the findings at the first live event that our industry had coming out of COVID. That 8,000 people online, and a couple brave souls that went to the first event. 800 of us were there at live events, and we presented that. And I was just so proud of Peretta and Orr taking such a proactive approach and helping move the conversation for our industry forward. So for me, that was one of the most proud that I've been at P&O. I just loved that our leadership was so adamant. No, we're not waiting. We're being proactive. Yeah. What can we do? So
I love it. That was such a challenging time, but there were so many bright light stories during that time too, of people, just creative people that are our friends in the industry, coming up with things that are entrepreneurial and exciting and different. And there was a lot of that. I love that. I love that story. What about you, Rick?
I actually do have a single project that I just fell in love with when we did it. It was maybe because I was an account manager on it. So I was very in the weeds of it about 11 years ago now. we had a pharma company that was splitting off their hematology products. And we never did the HCP part of their program. We only did patient shows. So for years, since 07 or 08, we had been doing patient shows in the hematology conference. So it's patients and caregivers, their parents, that go to these shows, which are big hotel shows, but they're hotel shows. It's really about education and support and how the patient can learn more about the product, but also get, different levels of support around things. Anyway, they were spinning off of their pharma products from their device products, and this was going to be the first outing for them at the biggest patient show for hemophilia in the country. And so they made it very clear. The objective was to be as loud as we possibly can. This was a new company with the same products and the same history. That was 2015 for us. I think it was the biggest single project we had done in company history. We moved a 40 by 80 into a Gaylord convention center that could not take the rig that we were doing. So we used self-rising truss, and we had perimeter LED and just things you would not have seen on this show floor, but they were truly trying to make the statement to the patient. So we had a 40 by 80, we had a 40 by 40, both for those products. We had 5 after hours events. We did a patient awards ceremony and an awards night from a production perspective. We did a give back community, enormous light bright wall that we made about 20 feet wide by 15 feet high, and with these huge light bright tags on it. Cool. So the whole project as a whole, not just one booth, but it was very cool. It was the start of that company, which then got bought several years later. But it was a very cool project to work on, and then be on site for 3 days and watch. It must have been 7 or 8 different executions and activations that happened throughout these 3 days with the very highly attended at that time patient community on site. Was a very cool project.
Sounds incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, that was really the part of it. It wasn't just, this is a cool fancy exhibit. It had a lot of different touch points going on, which made it very satisfying not only to watch, but to kind of see it all roll out the right way.
I was just talking about this with another friend, but in a big project like that, there's a moment when everybody's is different, but there's a moment where you're finally like, oh, this is cool. This is really, it's happening. It's doing it.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying. Yeah. And that's why we're all addicted to this stuff.
That's why.
That right there. Well, thank you both for taking time with me today. If people want to, are you LinkedIn people? Can people connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, okay. We're both on LinkedIn. The company's on LinkedIn. Jackie drives all that from our end. And then everything that goes through LinkedIn goes to her. So she's our person for anybody that wants to reach out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for taking time with me today.
Seth, thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you, listener, for being a part of this episode and listening along on this journey. If you want to hear more episodes like this, you can go to theeventproshow.com, where we have our entire back catalog of episodes. But either way, thank you for taking time with us today, and we'll see you on the next one. The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.